Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this very special episode of The War Room brought to you as part of the Clonestar podcast. I am your host, Mike Overton, and joining me in the co host seat this week is my wonderful friend from Ireland Show. How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad, Mike. Thanks for having me up.
Good. Now, in this, as I said, very special episode, we are delighted to welcome Terri Potts-Chattaway, production supervisor and later associate producer, and ultimately co-producer of Star Trek's TNG and DS9. And we welcome back the incredible Jay Chattaway, the Emmy award-winning legendary composer who has worked on TNG, Voyager, DS9, and Enterprise. Terri's brand new book, Journey to the Inner Light, is the biography of her husband Jay, and we are delighted to welcome them both to the show to discuss the book. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Show, I'm going to let you start this one off, I think.
That's the first question. Very simple question for you both, guys. How did you first meet?
Well, for me, I was an assistant to Rick Berman on Next Generation, and I sat in the production office and was watching all the people go by all the time. And for some reason, Jay stuck out to me that day. He passed by my desk, and I really have no idea why, because I was so used to seeing so many people. But yeah, I saw him and I remembered him. And then we didn't work together officially until Deep Space Nine. But did we meet before that? Properly?
Yeah, you came to a couple of remixes of Next Generation.
That's right. Yeah.
And there was always a sort of a bright moment because it was mandatory that the composers attended. They call them the dubs, where they play all the elements together. And I was always bugged because I could never hear the music loud enough. And it might have been my first show. I don't know. I'm not sure. But Terri came in with something for Rick Berman, he was the last person to approve the mixes. And I think he actually loved the composers, but he gave us a whole bunch of crap about stuff. Like, don't do this, don't do that. Don't use any drums. If you put trills in there, did you used to work on Mission Impossible? Or if you do that again, you're going to be working at the Holiday Inn, stuff like that. So, and Terri walks in, and she was like this bright piece of sunshine in the middle of a very angst-ridden session where we sit there for hours and listen to them pick apart our music. So, yeah, that's our mutual meeting.
Terri, how did you describe seeing Jay in your book? What was Jay wearing when he just saunters completely nonchalantly into the office?
So the usual attire for producers was like t-shirts and jeans and tennis shoes, but Jay had on a nice button-down shirt and dress slacks.
Maybe it's the same shirt.
His hair was, his hair, big, and his bushy eyebrows over his glasses. And his head was tilted. He tilts his head quite frequently, like he has an air of curiosity, which I didn't know, but he is intensely curious about people and life and how things work. And so it was all fitting. But I noticed that he was different. I didn't notice his shoes. He might have been wearing tennis shoes, but...
Jay, you strike me as a bit of a sandals kind of man. Would I be right in kind of saying that?
Probably not that day because it wasn't a sandals type of a day. But no, I don't know what shoes, but they were probably. I don't know why you're so interested in the shoes. Whatever that is.
Well, they say shoes tell a lot about a person, don't they?
I think
So in the book, Terri, you referred to one of the first times that you would have been, say, passing notes to Jay when he would have been scoring and things like that. How did that first day go for the two of you?
I was scared to death, to be honest. I had, a really wonderful mentor, which was Steve Oster, who was the associate producer when I was post supervisor, and he taught me so much. And I had sat in many scoring sessions with him, and he got promoted and got busy. And so I got promoted and started going to the scoring sessions. And it was my job to, critique the score is not really a great word. It's just review it as it's going down. And I would say, I would listen. In one ear would have the dialogue and one ear would have the music. And for me, it was just a general feel. It wasn't, take the violins out. Except one time I did that and I got in a whole lots of trouble. But yeah, that one we still have disagreements for. I'm surprised I brought it up because I always say, please don't tell me that, because he was right in the end, as usual. But so I came in late and I sat down. So he was rehearsing. Jay always rehearsed the biggest piece of music first to get all the elements balanced, all the instruments balanced, and also the musicians to have some time to practice. And then I came on the speaker.
Yes, you did. And I was expecting the other guy,
Steve
Oster. And then this kind of high feminine voice comes on. And so it's sort of like when you do a score on Star Trek, it's sort of like you turn around, like you're doing the Olympics. You turn around and they should hold up cards like, oh, I'll give it a 5 or I'll give it a 1. And everything is subject to approval. So here's this new voice. I said, oh, great. This will be the end of our relationship right now when I say this. I said, oh, great. Somebody else telling me how to do my music. And
no, that's in the book.
Oh, it's in the book? Oh, okay. Then we're safe. We're still together.
Well, at least it's not, wow, Steve, you've changed.
So that was my first, and
He didn't show it though. He was very tactful, as he always is, when he's working.
Try to be, yeah. It's a very stressful situation. We talked a little bit about this last time, but a lot of that music was probably written the day before, or maybe even that morning. And it's a rush. And then they're changing the film while I'm conducting the film and the music. And it's very frustrating. So there's a lot going through your mind. Like, how do I change this to make it fit? And then how do I change the music to accommodate the producer's wishes? Little did I know that she's only listening to half of my music. She's listening to
That's not true.
She's listening to the people talking, which we don't hear when we're conducting the score. We just hear the music and look at the picture. So it's a complicated job that she has to do, and she has to do it tactfully as well, without getting into too much skirmishes.
And you have to understand, it's very intimidating to go into a booth with all these professionals and these amazing composers, and then also all the musicians. Oh my gosh, and they're all looking at you. They can see you. They know, and half of them come in for the playback.
And to get the cookies that are in the control room.
So so it was very intimidating. But I must say, by the end of Deep Space Nine, we were having so much fun, and it was really a good time. It was my favorite.
You've kind of alluded to it briefly there, but what was some of the main disagreements that you both would have had over the years? Now, I say this, and there's a very big possibility the interview will end immediately, and we'll never hear from Jay or Terri ever again.
Okay, I'll be honest. So one time he had a very beautiful piece of music, and he had violins come in, and I said it took us out of the scene. The violins took us out of the scene. And he was none too happy with me.
It was The Best Is Yet to Come with Avery Brooks and Jimmy Darren singing. It's a big production number that I think we've told the story. At least it's in the book anyway. That,
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting because I thought I won the argument because she said, oh, it takes me out of the film when the strings come in. Like, where were the strings? I said, well, where was the rest of the band? There's no band there, So all of a sudden they're singing this big duet on the holodeck, and there's no band. I mean, there's like 3 guys or something,
Right?
Because that's all you could fit on the stage. But now there's a whole brass section and everything. But when the strings came in, it sort of flourished it. We had French horns. It was great. I thought so. But then to catch up with where we are, because we're doing a whole bunch of interviews and stuff, I watched the episode on TV. I don't hear the strings anymore.
Hey.
you were missing, but I listened. And there's
Now, after this, we're going to have to go watch it.
You're
And
not the only one.
I just had a quick look. That episode debuted on the 26th of February, 1999. So this argument is only 25 years and it's coming up on 3 months there. So-
yeah. But hey, the amazing thing is we can both remember it. So how's that? Yeah.
So far, there were few disagreements when we were working together, I think. Someone asked me once about what about the book? Like, did we have arguments about the book? And Jay was hesitant, and I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't gotten his blessing. But I would say, if he said he didn't want something in, it was rare. It was, and then maybe once or twice. At the end of the book, because the chapters are all pieces of music, the chapter names are all pieces of music he either conducted or arranged or a movie. In the end, we put, Jay gives his notes about that. Well, in the beginning, when I started the book, we both thought they would come at the end of the chapter. And he kind of still wanted that to happen. And I realized, no, it takes you right out of the story.
Just like the strings.
The flow. You're right. No, but it takes out of the flow of the story. And so we put him at the end. And ultimately he deferred to me on the book because he said, it's your book, but everything, I always had him read a full draft every time I changed things so that he was aware of everything that I was writing down and to make sure it was correct.
But
So
you have to
let me-
realize for about 8 years, she used this tape recorder and it's on all the time. So I have to be very careful what I
Yeah.
talk to her about.
I'd be cooking and I'd say, wait, could you wait for a minute? I gotta get my tape recorder. Or we'd be in the car and I'd say, okay, I'm gonna start interviewing you about this. If we were taking a long trip to one of the places, like we went to Monongahela where he grew up. And on the way there, I'm asking him all the questions. And so there's a lot of taped recordings.
So are you saying then that in your many years together, when you have any arguments, does one of you still say, but what about the strings? Does anyone ever just bring that up randomly to kind of put it in
It's
there?
come up several times.
Do you know
Just now, for example,
that though?
we're reading
Because
separately tonight, I think.
no, I love that because if we're in a heated argument, if I say that, we'll probably break up laughing, right?
So why say, actually, before I get into that, before we started the interview, I have to ask this question then, and does this still apply? Terri, you describe Jay in the book, word for word, because I have it as a quote. Jay approaches tasks methodically and slowly. I am more like a whirlwind. Is that an accurate description of you both?
Absolutely. He is very cautious and reserved and researches, and I'm just like, let's go, and I can tell you I'm sitting here with a broken foot because I moved a little too fast. So I'm always running around doing things very quickly, and he sits back and he's always saying, slow down, let's talk about it.
So, Terri, when you broke your foot, and hopefully that is not hopefully you're well on the way to healing. Did Jay say to you, "I told you shouldn't have done X, Y, or Z"?
Well, it's interesting. We were on the boat and we were working, and he said, "You moved too fast. That's why." Right? Again, and actually, this time it wasn't. This time it was just because there was 3 things going on at once. He had me going in 3 different directions, and we only had 6 inches between the stairs and the hatch that I fell in backwards. And so I was so caught up in the moment of trying to get this and that and the other thing that I forgot it was open, the hatch, and I fell into the bilge backwards and broke my foot. Yeah, in 4 places. So yay for me. Yeah. But
dear.
it's almost healed.
And Jay, would you accept the definition of you being a methodical and a man who approaches tasks slowly? Would that be accurate in your eyes?
That's pretty accurate. I think it applies to my writing as well. I do a lot of research. I look a lot of things up, and I don't make too many decisions too fast. And that's probably why it would take me a lot longer to write my scores. Probably the best advice I had was from my friend Dennis McCarthy, who he's lightning fast. I mean, he was on the road many times writing for Glenn Campbell, and he had to write things in an hour or something. And I was more trained differently. And finally, I said, Dennis, how do you do this so fast? He says, here's the lesson. He says, never look back. He said, just go from left to right. Don't go back and fix things. Because if you try to make it so everybody's going to like it, they're not always going to like it. And you can't do anything about it, but you have to get finished. So that was my lesson. And I was maybe, should the third trumpet have this note or should the second trumpet? And it was like, no, you can't do that. You just have to get finished. And so it applies to my writing and my lifestyle as well. I'm a little more like, I like to look things up before I act. If we're going to buy something, I have to get 10 reviews on like, what's the best chair we're going to buy or pen or something like that. So yeah, it's a little over the top maybe.
And
yeah.
Terry, do you want to kind of like strangle him at times that it takes him this long to make decisions? Yeah, I thought so.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's constantly saying, you're pacing again. You're pacing, slow down.
Or she'll say, we're going to Africa. I said, what, we're going to Africa? Okay, well, let me look it up and see, like, what are we going to do in Africa? And I spent like 2 months looking. By that time, she's got the tickets booked, the hotels, the elephants, whatever. I mean, it's over. So we're going. Yeah.
Jay, I thought you were about to say there, if Terry says we're going to Africa, I thought you were about to say you were going to look up 10 reviews of Africa and see what they said before you were willing to go there.
It's a great song.
Actually,
No.
Yeah, pretty much 10 reviews of different game preserves and stuff. But no, I did look it up and I didn't question her ability. I mean, she booked it, so we're going. That's it. We went. It was great.
I have a few questions about the book then to ask. So, Terry, why now? Why did you feel now was the time to say write this book? Now, I know it's a book that's been long in development and things like that, but like, what was it that you wanted to do with a book like this?
Okay, it was twofold. One, I was just walking around the house thinking, I want to write a book. I've never written a book. What's my story? What story do I want to tell? And Jay was on his umpteenth video, interview. Might have been yours. And, and I realized he has a story that people want to hear. So I said, maybe I should tell that story. And I was worried a little. I mean, that's a big undertaking and a lot of responsibility. But it was a gift to keep his legacy alive. And it was for him and his family. It was never, sure, we'd love to sell a lot of books, but it really was never that. It was, for me, it was just an exercise in love, to be honest. So yeah. And it was fun. It was fun going back and we traveled all through where he grew up and where he worked and all the people that I got to meet if I hadn't already met them to interview. It was really, really wonderful.
And like, how much of, say, Jay's story did you kind of know before you told the story in the kind of book? Like, how much of it was new to you as you kind of researched it and met with people and things like that?
I knew a lot, actually. I think it's hard to discern. I've been asked that because it's been so long. But we've sat around the dining room table and he's told the stories many times. So,
is that a good or a bad thing, Terry, when you're saying that? You're there going, oh no, he's going to tell that story again. I've only heard that 27 times this year.
Well, when you've been married for so long, that's going to happen. So it's part of the gig. So yeah, but I learned some things new, but I think one of the things I mentioned in the book, and it was really prior to the book, it was when we were working together, and I watched Jay for many years, and what I saw was a classically trained, quite rigid conductor, and then when we started the Vic Fontaine character and recording Jimmy Darren, and Jay was, I had no idea about his jazz background, and watching him groove with the band was really fun. It was like a whole different side of him that I hadn't seen. And that piqued my interest. And I hope people get that from the book is, there's a lot more to his music. Oh, but there is one thing I did learn. We went to the studio. We went not to the studio, to our storage unit, or a storage unit that he had, to look at his music. And he wanted to get the Star Trek music out he donated to West Virginia University. And Jay only hand wrote his music. It wasn't computerized at the time. He has five to six foot file cabinets full of handwritten music over the years. So that blew my mind, and to see it, and even him, he was like, wow, no wonder I didn't have a life.
Please tell me that this is digitized and backed up somewhere.
It is actually.
Good.
It's all archived at the West Virginia University's history archives, it's called, and it's all digitized. And students use this not just from that university, but people from all over can write to that library and use it for educational purposes. It's pretty cool. And I teach there once a year. I go in residence and teach film composing, so the students can look at an episode and then pull up the score and see it as it's progressing through the show. And it's not just the film music, but it's also my jazz scores and a lot of educational concert music and stuff. But for teaching music, it's very hard to find the original scores and watch them with the film. It's a very helpful thing to students, and students from all over the world have accessed this. It's pretty neat.
That's right, as long as it's backed up, because I'm just thinking paper doesn't last forever.
No.
And what's quite interesting, when she mentioned that it's all handwritten, well, it was for a lot of reasons. One was we didn't really have a great notation system at the time, but when one values your music, if it was all computer generated, there's really no autography involved. There's no way of saying that's really an original piece of music. It's like it could come from a computer. It could be AI now. It could be anybody could have done it. But now, when I donated the music, I actually had to do a handwriting analysis to prove that I wrote the music, and then they valued it in a certain way to be able to donate it as though it was truly my music.
Made it much more valuable is what the man who authorized it.
The appraiser.
The appraiser said it made it much more valuable.
So now a lot of things are not even seriously composed. They're programmed, you might say, and sometimes they never truly go into notation. It's just like living in a hard drive somewhere, but it
just goes straight into Sibelius or something along those lines, and it's just printed out if it needs to be. So
exactly.
And Terri, knowing Jay's personality and character at this point, was it a tough sell to get him on board with this book?
He wasn't too excited about it, and he's pretty much a private person, even though a lot of these stories he shares with friends and stuff. But in the end, we had a couple friends here visiting us, and I threw the idea out to them, and they were very enthusiastic. And I think after seeing that and hearing that and thinking about it, and also, we had, right as I began the book or the research, we had an interest from WVU, and they wanted to write a biography of him, but I was already on board with doing it. So there was a kind of it justified in his mind. Okay, maybe somebody wants to read this.
And also, we've had interest from university presses, etc., but they wanted a very academic, instructional book on how you write music for film and television, and that wasn't Terri's idea. She wanted it to be a more personal story, and one that she's in as well, that comes from her point of view of what it's actually like living with a crazy composer, and watching the work ethic, and also our times together. So
Well, yeah, and also though I mean, it wasn't so much that I wanted to be in it. I wanted it to be my voice.
Yeah.
But Jay you did keep saying, I want more of you in it. Put more of you in it. So I tried, but the challenge was to be consistent, because I was not in his life in the first half.
Yeah.
And then I was. So how do you do that? That was very challenging for me. But I read a book about from Maxine Gordon, who was married to Dexter Gordon, the jazz saxophonist.
Mhm.
She wrote Sophisticated Giant, and he was first, he was going to write his autobiography, but he passed away before he finished. So she took it on, and she also met him midlife, and she also worked with him as his manager. It's a little different than what I did, but so that kind of inspired me, like, okay, it can be done. I just have to be consistent. And I've had a few people who've read it saying they like the approach, that it's very readable.
Yeah.
So that made me feel confident that my approach was okay, even though it wasn't academic.
And Terri, what were some of the biggest challenges that you came across when doing the book? This sounds like an interview. I'm about to kind of say, like, tell me where you see yourself in 5 years, kind of thing, or give me an example of a time when something happened. But what were some of the biggest challenges you came across in doing the book?
That was a big challenge. Like I said, the biggest challenge is keeping my voice consistent through it. And then I wanted to handle his personal life delicately and not honestly, but not get salacious and into, like some people want to do when they sell books. They want to make it, let's show you all the dirt.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to do it honestly, but not do that.
Yeah.
So that was another challenge to be delicate in how I handled his personal life.
And as you went through it, Terri, and all the kind of people you spoke to, all the interviews you did and things like that, and discovering, say, even more about Jay than you would have already known, was there anything you discovered or anything that surprised you about him in terms of what you kind of may have found out? Not in a bad way, of course, like I'm saying in a kind of a good way, say. Not saying there's any skeletons in Jay's
You hoarded
closet.
5 cabinets of paper.
Right. Well, yeah. Besides the jazz thing, which was before, I think it was the nerdiness of the college years. And how his college buddies just loved to tear him up and make fun of him because he was so dedicated, and it drove him crazy. And they were just like, what is this guy? We got to torture him. But all in love and jest, because they're still friends 50 years later. So
there's some brilliant anecdotal stories you have in there about situations like that I think people are going to really kind of love to kind of read about them as well. And Jay, say over your time as well, like you met with a lot of people, say you would have worked with over the years and things like that. You haven't met them for a long time. So like, what was your journey like as part of this as well?
Oh boy.
We asked the hard questions here, Jay. You should know that. You were on the show before Christmas. You know what to expect coming on here with us.
The people that I've met, are you speaking of that? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
like people you would have worked with, people you would have known, like that you might have revisited, say, as doing the kind of this book and kind of say coming back to memories that you mightn't have kind of thought about in a long time. Like, how was all that for you? Because obviously it is Terri's book, she's writing it, but it is about your life, and it might be kind of coming back to kind of things that you might have forgotten about, positive memories that kind of come flooding back that you might have thought about in a while.
I think one of the most important remembrances is she went into great detail about the group that we had when I was in college called the Abductors. And this was an R&B band where we had a big horn section like Chicago or Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And we all wore either shark skin suits or puffy silk shirts that rolled up and down, unbuttoned. And all that, she interviewed all the players that she could find that were in that group. And they all wrote about what a life-changing experience it was with this band in like the 60s. And how cool it was that we were doing crossover music in in a school that was the #1 party school in the country at that time, and and we were selling out all these crowds. We were going and opening for major R&B bands, and our big television shows that we were on. It was really, and all the people she interviewed brought all that back, and like I didn't really forget about it, but I didn't have it high on my list of wow, I was in the Abductors, that was like awesome. And there's some pictures, and unfortunately we can't find any great recordings that we had of the band. We did record, and we played on television shows, and it was quite the adventure. And she brought all that back, and the players that were part of that are still around, and they all still play. But they all wrote about how, for them, that was the pinnacle of their musical careers, playing in that band. And I guess it was pretty good. I don't know.
How about on a personal note, talking with Aunt Norma?
That's cool.
That was really cool.
My dad's sister, who was in her 90s at the time, kept everything about me.
Which they had no idea.
I had no idea. She kept every newspaper clipping. Wow. And so when we went to visit her in California, she showed us all this stuff that she had for 40 years that she kept all about me, and she shared it with us. And it was just wonderful to reconnect with her before she passed. It was just amazing that somebody would have that detail about me. And I was very impressed by that. Thanks for remembering.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to say, Jay, I love you to bits, as you know, but I must say that some of the bits of the book that made me laugh the most was situations and stories where things weren't going your way. And I was just thinking what was going on in his head when these things were falling apart or not going the way. Like, what was it? I think was there 2 stories in the book where musical notes were forgotten about and they were left on a train or in a taxi going somewhere.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme for somebody that seems to have it together. But my first professional gig was writing for Harold Betters, who was a jazz trombonist from Pittsburgh, and he ran the Pittsburgh Steelers football band, which was a big deal. And they played at in the stadium. There was an all brass band, and he heard me do something. I'm still in college, and he wanted an arrangement of the music from Man from La Mancha. And so I did like a 5-minute, 6-minute medley for his band, and they were going to play it that weekend at the Steeler game. So we were going to have a rehearsal in Pittsburgh. So I got my whatever car it was at the time. I went to the gas station, got out and got gas. I had my briefcase with all the music in it, put it on the roof of the car. Typical story, right? We drive off to Pittsburgh, is like 50 miles or something. And I get to the rehearsal, and I looked in the back of the car, there's no music. And here's all these professional guys, and I'm thinking, this is pretty weird. And there's no cell phones or anything. But sure enough, the guy who owned the gas station, Glenn Lashley, I remember his name, Lashley's Esso station, saw the music, and he called my wife at the time and said, what's up? He says, well, he's going to Pittsburgh to rehearse with Harold Betters. And the guy says, well, he's not going to have the music, so I'm going to drive up there. So he drove up and he found us, and we were only like 20 minutes late for the rehearsal with the music. And it was pretty cool. They gave him tickets to the game and everything. So I escaped that one.
That's the benefit of living in a small town. He knew Jay and to call his wife.
Right. And he knew who Harold Betters was, So yeah.
Jay, I'm not going to lie to you. As I read that story, I was there going, how did Jay Chattaway, of all people, leave that briefcase on top of his car?
Yeah, it was pretty dumb, but I've done it with other things too. So, but the other one, it wasn't really my fault, but
no, it wasn't.
I had done the score to Stephen King's Silver Bullet, which for me, that was kind of a big deal. It was Dino De Laurentiis movie, Stephen King, Gary Busey starring with Corey Haim. Beautiful little movie and a big orchestra. And we recorded it. And my music editor, we recorded in Connecticut, and he was in charge of delivering the tapes, the master tapes, to the film studio in New York City. He gets on the train with about $100,000 worth of tapes, and he goes to the films place. He didn't take the tapes with him. He left them on the train. And he gets there, and the film people are calling me. He's like, "Where's the music? Where's the music? We're mixing the film." And we had like world-class Academy Award mixers, like Lee Dichter, who mixed a lot of very famous films. And they're like stalling around at like $400 an hour at the time. And so Jack realized, his name was Jack Tiller. He was a genius, but not completely. So he said, "Oh, I left him on the train."
He was a bumbling dude.
Yeah, he was brilliant, but messed up. So I said, "Well, Jack, you got to find the tapes. Go back to the train station. Maybe they're there." Sure enough, he goes back to the Grand Central Station in New York City. The same train that he was on, had made the round trip, came back in. They let him on the train. The tapes were exactly where he left them.
Oh my God.
So he picked up the tapes,
How lucky is that?
went to the studio.
That is one hell of a struggle arc.
Yeah. So it was quite the scare. I thought, great, they paid this money for this music, and now they don't have any music, and I'm going to have to recreate it somehow. So, but anyway, it worked out. It turned out to be a cool thing, but it was a nerve-wracking couple of hours, that's for sure.
I can imagine.
So there.
And Terry, as you're writing the book, obviously, look, Jay is so well known for his work on Star Trek and things like that. And like say, even with our interviews that we do in this podcast, we try not to kind of just solely focus it on Star Trek, because it's the obvious kind of place to go for. Outside of Star Trek, what were the kind of main areas of Jay's life that you wanted to touch on with the book? Because obviously, it's brilliantly kind of walked through his entire life. There's so many really good anecdotes and kind of building it up. Was there anything specific you said, I want to kind of draw attention to this?
I think, in how he came from the Navy and moved into New York City and working as a record producer in those years. I'm a jazz fan, so, for me, it was fun to, and I'm so jealous I wasn't with him at that time, because I would have loved to have been with him and meet all those people and been in those recording studio sessions. So that was fun for me, spending time there.
Weren't you at the Carnegie Hall concert I did? No?
Anyway, so that was fun. Yeah, and just interviewing some of these really cool directors, and Bob James, getting to, Marion Meadows was such a cool story, because I was on the boat with Jay in California, and we had the radio on to the local jazz station, and I hear Jay Chattaway on the radio, that words. And I was like, shh, shh, turn it up. And it was Marion Meadows, and he was talking about this story, how when he was in Grand Central Station, very, very late at night, one night in New York City, and his friend, there was nobody there. It was the last train. And he was like, his friend was saying, "Why don't you, see how it sounds to play your sax?" And he got on, he was playing it, and Jay walked in, and he actually came up to him and said, "That sounds really beautiful. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I work for CBS Records and Tappan Zee at the time, Tappan Records. Why don't you come in and meet with us? Maybe we could record you." And so when I heard that, so when I called Marion Meadows or emailed him, he immediately called and said, or emailed back and said, I'd love to tell the story again. I'm happy to be part of it. He contributes his, even though they didn't, Tappan Zee Records was starting to close shop, basically. It was the end of the contract. And so the roster was pretty full. So he never really got a chance to record on Tappan Zee, but it introduced him to a lot of other people, which he says was life-changing for him in terms of his career. So that was fun, finding stories like that, by happenstance.
I had the album all designed. I mean, I even wanted to record part of it in Grand Central, because you can imagine what the acoustics are there at night with nobody else there. It was amazing. And he's a great player, very soulful, player, and it was beautiful. He didn't even have his case open. Nobody's putting money in it or anything like that. It was like he just wanted to play. You know, it was great. So yeah, it was.
Terry, you were saying this is the first book you've written. I suppose one of the questions I have is, what was your favorite part of the creative process in writing the book? See, Terry, I'm catching now with all the hard questions here now as well today. It's not just Jay. I have to ask you the hard questions too. I can't go easy on one of you.
The research is always really a lot of fun, and I think it's the research and going and actually going to all those places. I love to travel and actually seeing them and then taking photos, and so I'd have a visual so I could describe it properly. Yeah, I love being creative. And so the most difficult part for me is more of the straightforward stuff. But when I was able to be a little more creative, then I had a lot of fun with it, whether it be setting or description of us, something more personal as opposed to, how he worked or how he developed something that's factual, right?
Yeah.
When I could do something more creative, I had fun with that. Yeah.
I'd like to say too, I think that for me is, maybe that was your next hard question for me, but I'll beat you to it. So for me, what the best parts of the book were when she wasn't having to deal with the minutia of my career, but she was able to describe in her beautiful prose about what it was like to visit, for example, the cemetery where my parents were buried, and it was fall and the leaves were swirling around, and we were living in California, so you don't see swirling leaves in the fall, and the smells and the church bells in the distance and all that. It was very beautifully written, and so I'm hoping she writes another book where she doesn't have to deal with me, but she can just write description about cool stuff.
And am I right, Terry? Like Jay, you've just mentioned it there. You beat me to 2 questions now, Jay. It's not fair. Like it's supposed to be me doing, asking you the questions here.
Okay.
Is the first time, Terry, that you went back to Jay's home place, was that 2015? Am I right in saying that? That's the impression I got from the book. I could be wrong when I'm saying that.
Actually, we went in 2002. We actually took a trip. He had some work thing going on. So we took a trip, but we didn't. No, we didn't get to Monongahela, did we?
Just went to Pittsburgh.
We went to Pittsburgh. So we were close, but we were not all the way there. Yeah. So yes, that was the first time we went back.
And in terms of now, I'm going to ask a really unfair question, especially because he's sitting right next to you, which is, what sets Jay apart from other composers? I see the way Jay's head is slowly turning to face Terry at the moment. So what's she going to say?
Well, it's not that he is, as a composer is different than other composers. It's just that his music that I've listened to, in particular things like The Inner Light or private pieces that he's written for me, touch me in a way that, I don't know, nothing else can. And I try to explain it in the book, but so yeah. So it's just, I think his, I think it's just his music that makes him unique, Yeah.
That's lovely. That's a great answer.
So,
and
Terry, why did you use this title?
Okay, I had a long time, lot of trouble with titles. I always do, I think, but this one was hard. And then one day it just came to me, and it made perfect sense because the book is bookended with him at Royal Albert Hall in 2015, and then I finished with that, and then so it's like, and this is such a big piece of music in his career. It's very, very well known, and that was such a pivotal moment, being at Royal Albert Hall with 5,000 people and the London Philharmonic, and I mean, I don't think it gets better than that. And so it was, and then so it was his journey to get to that place musically, but also it's the inner light in my, not having to do with the story, the original story, but I feel like the inner light is where his muse is, right? So it's a journey to his muse as well. Like, where does the music come from?
One question I have for you both is that there's one huge recurring theme throughout the book, which is both of your love of the water. And now I can't remember, was this, no, I might be getting this wrong, but was it a boat or no, it was the boat, wasn't it? That Jay put in a really lowball offer to buy a really fancy boat because the thing was barely seaworthy. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it was in Mexico, in La Paz, Mexico. I saw this beautiful boat that I had been looking at those kind of boats, but I didn't really want to spend the kind of money that people would want. And so this was a boat that a couple had decided they were going to sail around the world, and they left from San Diego, California, and they only got about 800 miles south, and which happens frequently to people that are new to this crazy thing. And they sort of dissolved their relationship in the middle of the bay, and one went one place and one went another. They just left the boat out there, and the seagulls and the roaches and various other animals had their way with it. And but I went to see it anyway, and I thought, well, this is pretty structurally sound, I thought. And I opened the hatch, and about a gazillion roaches came out, and there was an open bottle of box of Bisquick on the counter filled with bugs. And I opened up a hatch, and the water came streaming in. And so I immediately went back to shore after I plugged up the hole, and I called the broker and said, look, that's a pretty nice boat, but if I don't buy it, it's going to sink. And they said, oh, no, that's not the case. So they sent some appraiser out, and he confirmed my suspicions. So I said, I'll make a very low ball offer on this boat and see if they accept it. And ultimately they did. So we hauled the boat out and fixed it. And that's the same boat we have now 30 years later.
So you weren't like, oh God, what have I done? I bought this boat and I've now got to fix it.
Yeah.
No, you didn't say, oh God, what have I done? He loves fixing the boat.
Yeah, I like fixing it. I'm still fixing it. That's what I do every year.
Yeah.
But we had to sail her back and because I was doing Deep Space Nine, I think, at the time. And I had 2 weeks off between episodes, and I had to sail from Mexico back to San Diego in time to get to do the next show. And we had all kinds of trouble.
Which is something you never want to do, is take a cruise when you have a schedule, because a boat is a boat and you never know what's going to go. Plus the weather.
I was going to say the weather's like the most unpredictable thing going. So
yeah.
But he made it back, and this is a boat we sailed to back to Mexico in 2013, and yeah, we love it. He actually invited me when we were working together over and over again for like a year. Oh, you should come on my boat. You should come sailing with me. I was like, finally, I was like, you know what, Jay? Stop asking me, because you never come through with it. So I love boating. And he was like, oh, okay. Then I got a proper invite. And
I think there's a lovely story about that in the book, I think, as well, Terry, where he was describing what you were kind of like on a boat and how kind of relaxed you were. So, Jay, what you're saying is this lovely boat that you bought, when you saw it, it was in rack and ruin, which was kind of almost like an example of how the previous owner's relationship had gone. And you didn't think in any way, maybe I should steer clear of this boat. It only seems to be attracting bad luck.
Yeah, but it was, there's something about it that sort of called to me, and it just had the right lines. And I had two real strict criteria, is that I had to be able to stand up in the stateroom where you sleep, and I had to be able to stretch out and sleep in the cockpit where you steer the boat, because I'm around 6 feet tall, and a lot of boats are kind of cramped and stuff. And it had to be a good sailor that I could sail by myself, because at the time I was pretty much a solo sailor. I did have an autopilot on the boat, but would only turn left. So that wasn't going to work for me.
So your autopilot was a NASCAR driver. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, it turned out. And so when Terri did come along, I think I bought her a book about how to sail or something. And But she got on the boat. She looked very relaxed, and she was having a beer. I could say that, right? Yes, having a beer, and we were still co-workers. There was nothing beyond that. But she looked so relaxed and happy. I said, "Hey, this might be a possibility." And
so he gives me a book one year for my birthday of sailing, and then I said, "This is all fun and great, but I need lab. You can't learn to sail a boat." Right? From a book. I mean, it helps, but you have to actually do it. So then he got me sailing lessons because he thought it wouldn't be a good idea for him to teach me.
But she's very good. She took classes in navigation and weather and everything. And so in addition to being a fine producer and writer, she's a navigator and a sailor and
a proud sailor.
And yeah, pretty good.
So am I kind of reading between the lines here correctly and thinking that if Jay had to teach Terri how to sail, that it would have probably ended in total disaster?
It's like trying to teach your kid piano lessons. It just doesn't really work.
Yeah, so. Actually, the good thing is he's very he's not a yeller, and he's very patient, except when he's racing. I just found out. Then he's a whole different person. When we're racing our sailboat, a different man comes out. He's very competitive.
So, Terri, am I right in guessing here that the worst thing you could ever do to Jay would be to disappoint him? It wouldn't even be to make him angry, but to actually make him disappointed?
Worst thing I could do was not like the boat. That's the worst thing I could do. Not want to sail anymore.
So, just purely out of interest, what's the most amazing piece of wildlife you've seen on the boat?
Oh.
On the boat, it's whales.
Whales,
and we've seen them many times in many different situations.
Different species. Like the blue whale, the world's largest mammal. Yeah. We sailed amongst a pod of blue whales in California, and in Mexico.
We had one, remember, he came up and he went underneath our boat.
Right.
And we were like, and he swam around our boat for like 5 minutes. I mean, it maybe was 3 or 2, but it felt like a really long time, right?
And this is an animal that's twice as big as our boat. So,
And we got a 45-foot boat, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're pretty big. But in Mexico, we sail with them every day. Sometimes you have to slow down because they're in your way. They're doing tricks and flopping up and down, and it's beautiful. And of course, I recorded them, so I have a whole whale orchestra or choir, I guess you could say. And yeah.
And so Jay, like you've done, and the book really does point out all the incredible work you've done, including the work with the abductors, of course, which I cannot not reference here at this point, right? But obviously, one of the most important bits of music you have is obviously the Inner Light and how well it's connected to Star Trek fans and all that. If that was the only piece of music you were remembered for, the Inner Light, and say the kind of anything to do with it, would that be enough for you? Would you consider it, do you know what, I've done that, if that's just the one piece people remember, I'm delighted? Or would you say, no, I've this ginormous body work, I'd prefer people remembered me as an overall kind of musician, composer?
No, you know what, that would probably be enough, that one piece. Not so much because of the piece of music, but for the amount of people that it has affected. A lot of my other scores and music affects some people certain ways, but that piece of music has had worldwide universal acclaim, and it's been used for everything from graduations and weddings, funerals, special occasions. And I guess the best compliment that I could have had is that my dear friend was passing away, and she wanted to have that music played to her, the recording, as she was passing. And that was pretty deep. So I don't know any piece of music that could beat that. So yes, that's the piece of music. And if I didn't write anything else, I'm glad I wrote that one.
But Jay, that means you're putting the music of the Inner Light ahead of your score to Maniac Cop. And I'm not.
Oh, but you know
what? Not sure here.
No, that might be a contender, but no, not really. I mean, how many people have an Uzi in their jacuzzi? Come on, that's
true. That is very true.
Lyrics to that song.
There's one story, Terry, that you put in the book, and I absolutely love it because it kind of reminds me of James Cameron's idea for the Terminator, which is Jay coming up with the music that he won the Emmy for in a dream.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
does that actually happen?
Well, I think this
Terry,
comes
he
back
didn't
to-
actually wake you up in the middle of the night suddenly going, I've got it. I know what I'm going to write here. I know what to put down in the music.
No, it didn't. It didn't work that way. Nor did the inner light come about that way. It was not the inner light. It was the piece of music that ended the Borg conflict in Voyager
Yeah.
for the last episode, and it has a lot to do with, I think.
Last episode of Voyager.
Hmm?
Voyager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, if I said the inner light there, sorry, I misread my own notes because my own notes said Voyager Endgame and I clearly said the wrong thing. Sorry, that's my fault. We can't
Yeah,
catch it in
no, that's
editing,
okay.
so it's out there.
But I think a lot of the music that I conceive, I still believe it comes from another source, which might be what my inner light is. I'm not really sure. Nobody really knows how music is conceived, or some do it painstakingly by trial and error. But for example, and I'll get to your point of your question in a minute, The Inner Light was written in about 10 minutes. I mean, I just sat down and I heard it. It's like, this is it. And when I see a lot of films, I sort of hear the scores, but writing them down is what takes me out of the memory of what the music is. But in this one case, I did awaken because I was struggling with how to do a Borg destruction theme, if you will, and I started keeping a notepad with music notation manuscript next to my bed, and I dreamt this thematic concept, and I woke up and I wrote it down. It was only 3 notes, and I thought, well, that's probably going to go away. But when I got up in the morning and played it, that was what it was, and that was the Emmy-winning score. So there's something to that. I guess we don't all have manuscript paper in our bedrooms, but
No, but I have a notebook.
Okay,
I have a
could have
notebook.
found it, you know.
I also now I have a voice recorder on my watch because
Oh,
I
beautiful.
come up with the most random ideas, and I will come up with solutions to problems that have been bugging me for months. Because I swim 3 times a week in the morning, and because my brain switches off, and then all of a sudden I'll be halfway down the pool and go, that, and then I'll just stop dead center, shout into my watch, and then carry on going. And then when I get back home, I'll then go, that's what I was thinking. So
is your watch waterproof?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
And I just use the notes function on my phone. Here was all my notes I wrote for the book that we're just talking about here. So every time I came across something, I said I better note that down straight into the phone because I can never remember it.
That's very cool.
And there's a lovely story that's in the book about you receiving your Emmy. Now, if I got this correctly, you got sick of going to a lot of the Emmy Awards because you weren't winning. So the one time you won,
you won.
Yeah, it's pretty awful to go and lose. I mean, everybody said, "Oh, it's just being nominated." That's BS. That's not really the case, because you get to walk down the red carpet, and well, for Paramount, they pick you up in a limo. I have a nice picture of Terry coming to the Emmys one year in a limousine. It was very nice, and but you walk down this big red carpet, and there's people cheering and everything, and you go and sit through this long drawn out affair where every conceivable category is called in the alphabetical usually. So M is pretty much toward the end. People are sleeping and it's really boring. And then they call other people's names and you don't get one. One year it was so bad they had these, like, do you remember Woody Allen's movie Sleeper where they had this tube on the, well, they had these tubes that they built and it was not an orgasmatron, okay? It was just a tube. So we had to
just
go
make a Barbarella reference in this podcast.
Right.
Jay, who's going to know about that but the 4 of us?
Like, you can edit accordingly. There were these tubes that you went in as a nominee, and If you won, they opened the door and you came out on the stage and you got your Emmy. If you lost, you went out the back door. Well, that year I was nominated twice. I had to get in the damn tube 2 times, went out the back door twice. It was embarrassing. But then, so I think after 6 times,
Yeah.
Dennis McCarthy and I were both nominated for a Star Trek show. And I decided, had a lot of other things going on too. There's no way either of us are going to win because the votes are going to be split. I'm not going to go through that again. Plus, I just had a death in the family, and I was preparing to go to a funeral like this next week, and I had a show to do. So instead, I stayed home and worked on the next show. And Terry calls me or emailed me or something. You called me, said, Jay, yes, you just won an Emmy.
And I said, congratulations.
I said, what? She says, yeah, you can go online and look, and there's your. So they have like,
right here, honey.
yeah, and they had all the nominees, and if you got an Emmy, there's an Emmy next to your name. I said, well, that's a fine kettle of fish, isn't it? I didn't go, and I went all those other times. Actually, there more than Star Trek. I had a couple of National Geographics and some other stuff, but I had the note. My speech was still in my pocket, so I never got to give it. But Terry was mentioned in the speech, but I never gave it.
I saw that.
Well, it's somewhere. Maybe it's in the archives. I don't know. Yeah. So I said, well, okay. So when I got back from the funeral thing, I went to the Television Academy, which is big plaza in North Hollywood. They have a giant Emmy statue with fountains and stuff. But it was after hours because I just came from doing a session, and I went up to the guy who was the night watchman, and I said, I'm here to pick up my Emmy, and he says, oh, okay. And he goes through this pile of Emmys. They're all wrapped in plastic bags. They look like body bags. And he sorts through them all and has my name on it. He says, oh.
Brings it down a peg. So
Right.
Plastic, bags.
Yeah, it was awful.
These wonderful Emmys that
Yeah.
everybody's like.
Yeah. So anyway, this man was probably in his 70s and very nice, soft-spoken gentleman. He says, well, an Emmy. He says, I wish I could have gotten something like that. He says, I'm a black man and I'm from the South, and I didn't get to go to school, but I'm an artist. And if I could have gotten an award like that for being an artist, it would have made my life. And I said, I have an idea. So why don't we go out to the big Emmy statue there, and you tell me a little bit about your history, and I'll present you with an Emmy for your life's work. They said, oh, that would be great. And I gave him some stuff about me. So we went out to the statue, just the two of us, around 11 o'clock at night in North Hollywood. And it was very peaceful and at the time. And so I read his history, and I presented him with the Emmy and congratulated him. And then he read my story, and he gave me my Emmy, still in the plastic bag. And and I took it home. And that was it. That was I didn't have to eat any rubber chicken. I didn't have to sit at a table where some clown has already won an Emmy and I didn't. So that's how it worked out. And it meant more to me than any of the other Emmy things that could have been. So, except I would like to have had more than one, but that's okay.
So whenever we watch the Academy Awards, Emmy Awards, whatever you want to call them, and you see, the nominees for whatever, and it shows everyone's face and all that. When you were like the 4th or the 5th time in, and like they were calling you out, were you deep down going, if they don't call out my name, I'm just going to trash this place and I'm never going to return here ever again?
Well, they try to lubricate you enough so you don't do that. So there's like, drinks and food and stuff. So it's okay. But here's an interesting aside. So while I was involved with getting Emmys and stuff, the man who was on the board of governors for the Emmys was a production management person. Turns out that he now owns or manages the big bookstore here in our town, and he's helping Terri promote her book by we're having a screening of some of my films, and Terry's going to present her book, and we're doing a signing, and we were both at the Television Academy at the same time. Small world.
Oh wow, that's absolutely yes. I want to bring it back for a second. You were talking, Jay, about how quickly you can compose things. And Terry, you said as well about the music that Jay has written and composed and things like that. And you said there's certain bits that he's written just for you and things like that. And when you're doing those bits of music for specifically Terry, if you don't mind me asking, of course, Jay, like how fast do you come up with those compositions, or does it take a bit of time? Terry's there going, I'm going to be very interested to see what he says here now in terms of an answer.
Oh, I know the answer.
Well, I guess one of the pieces she's referring to is a piece I wrote called Angel Song. So I always just called her my angel because she was, keeping me out of the bad place. So it didn't take long. I wrote it and recorded it in a day.
He does that. He just goes to the piano and composes something, and and I'm like, what's that? He's like, I don't know. I just came up with it.
Yeah, it comes from another place, and I'm thankful that I'm chosen to be a receptor of wherever it comes from. It's very cosmic and whatever. I don't know how. I'm sure you've interviewed many people, and be interesting to see where others think it comes from. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to have a symposium of creative people, and then have maybe a medium or someone, a psychic or something, to interview everyone to see where does your art come from? Where does your literature come from? Where's your dance skills? Are they inherited? Do you get them from another source? Are they floating up there and you turn up to 88.7 on your dial and it comes in? It's a mystery, and it should probably remain a mystery, which makes us feel a little special.
And I have to ask then as well about the fact that you both worked on Star Trek for so long. You met while you were working on Star Trek. And when all that came to an end, what was that like in terms of saying goodbye to such a kind of important part of your lives? And also, how much contact do you stay with the people you would have, say, worked with on there?
Will you be first?
Well, for me, it kind of ended after Deep Space Nine, so I didn't go to the work on Voyager Enterprise. So it's very hard because, and then I did go to the wrap party with Jay for the very last one, and of course I knew most all the people who I worked with, and I have to say I was during Next Generation casting. I was pregnant with my son. And when we went to the wrap party, he was graduating high school. If that puts it in perspective, so even though I wasn't, I would still go and visit Jay on the scoring stage when he was scoring for other shows, other Star Trek shows. We stay in touch with some of the people, not all of the people. I have to say, when I look at Next Generation and all the cast and how they've stayed close, I'm kind of envious because I knew all them when, right? I was there for the beginning, and it's like so it'd be nice to see them. We went to the Las Vegas event in 2016, and then I got to meet up with LeVar again and Marina and Terry Farrell and stuff, and so that was fun. But yeah, so yeah, Dan Curry just wrote us today. So some of the people we do stay in touch with, but it was very difficult for me personally because I went through so much with it. It was such a family. It really was a big family, and I miss them.
I think for me, when Deep Space Nine ended, it sort of opened the door for Terry and myself to have a relationship.
Right.
When you're working together, you actually have to sign a paper saying that there's no I don't know what fraternization. There's a wonderful word for me saying exactly what it says, right? You can't fraternize with any coworkers because you think about it, you fraternize, and then one of the fraternization partners doesn't work out. Then there's antagonism. So then you have antagonistic fraternization, This
Well,
could be on Jeopardy or something.
that came from at Paramount Studios. There was an executive and his, I believe, secretary, and it got ugly. And so then we all had to sign these.
It's sort of like a non-disclosure.
prenup.
Yeah, prenup. You don't go into space with your partner.
Yeah.
So or any space. But after that, actually, I remember very well because Terri was now freelance. She was out. She was doing big stuff, but it wasn't the family part of it wasn't the same.
Right.
And so she would come to visit me as a friend, and then we thought, well, gee, this could be really good. And then we went sailing some more, and that's how it worked out.
Yeah, but he's talking about the Star Trek family.
Yes. Don't get me off track. But for when it was over, when Star Trek was over for me, it was Star Trek Enterprise, and the last piece I wrote was a piece called Archer's Farewell or Archer's Speech. Yeah. And it was the last piece I recorded. I wrote that piece 8 times. It's not something that came instantly because I knew it was the last piece I was going to write for Star Trek. And there were tears in my eyes, as well as in a lot of the musicians. And Terri, unbeknownst to me, went around. She came to visit that score. It was a big score. The Warner Brothers, we had a big orchestra. She went around and had all the members of the orchestra sign a big copy of my score, and then mounted it and framed it. And I still have it. Unfortunately, it's in my storage unit because it's no wall space here big enough to put it on. But we're going to build something to put it on, I think, just for that. And it's a beautiful gift. And what all the people wrote on it was so special.
It was a great day, though. It was very emotional.
Yeah,
that score.
It was a cool thing. And but I still stay in touch with a lot of the musicians that I worked with. Terri would probably agree with this too. But when you have a position of authority in a big show or a big movie, you get a lot of people wanting your attention so they can get hired. I mean, it's not always a two-way street. And I think we both noticed that.
They're not always the friends you thought they were.
Right. But a lot of my musician friends, even though we're not hiring them or working together, we stay in touch and commiserate and remember. We keep threatening to have a reunion of musicians. It might be right after the Abductors reunion. I'm not sure. It could be fun.
I think the Maniac Cop kind of reunion is due to happen sometime soon.
Isn't it? I'm obsessed with those films. I don't know. Well, Bill Lustig, who is a good friend, and we stay in touch a lot. They have almost every other weekend. They do some kind of Maniac Cop spectacular where they play all the movies. They do Maniac Cop 1 and 2, and actually 3, or Maniac 3. I'm not sure. And it's sort of a bloodbath, and people come to these things, and mostly in New York, it's a big deal. So
yeah, there's quite a cult following. Music.
So I was glad to contribute to those films, and they were a great example of how music can be such a manipulative skill. Like it's fun to scare the crap out of people, and that's what we did. I know that goes our rating, but oh well.
Fine.
Oh, and trust me, we've had much worse on the show, Jay. Don't worry, and it's come from me and him mainly.
Yeah.
Terri, as you said, the book is bookended by your trip to London. And what was it like being at such an event? Because the Star Trek community is so kind of full of love, full of reverence for kind of what's going on, and especially the music side of it. Like those of us who love the Star Trek music, we love the Star Trek music. And to see Jay going up on stage to do his music, knowing that it's going to be received so strongly by an audience of 5,000 people, how was that for you to watch that? For Jay, it was probably water off a duck's back. I'd say Jay didn't even bat an eyelid at it. But how is it for you to kind of look up and go, "That's my man up there on that stage," and there's so much love being directed towards him?
Yeah, I talked a lot about watching him and he was like on this other realm, really comfortable with what he was doing in front of all those people. I would have been terrified and shaking, but it was beautiful. It was really special, and I felt really honored to be able to be part of it. I mean, it was quite a wonderful week that we spent there. And the people, even better, was the people that were running. What's the name of the company? I forget now.
You mean Justin?
Yeah, Justin Freer and Brady. They and Molly. I mean, the people that were running the show and put it together were so kind and so giving and generous. And so it was a very relaxed. Nobody felt any tension, you know.
No,
it was really, but to see all those people come into this beautiful venue, all these fans, and hear the reaction, right, when they heard the music, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And this is a common thing between writers and composers and maybe artists and maybe interviewers and everything. But what is it you call it in your writing classes where you think you're going to be found out or whatever it's called?
Oh, the imposter syndrome.
The imposter syndrome. You know about that, right?
Yeah, that big time.
Well, I'm sure, I don't know if you talked to any of your other composers or that you interview, but it's universal. At least it was for me.
It's pretty universal.
Every session that I did, I thought, oh my God, I bet I screwed up the instrumentation, or I didn't transpose something right, or I'm getting up here in front of 60 musicians and wow, I wonder if I did something really wrong. But then all it takes is about 10 seconds and you're into it. Oh, I got it right. This is cool. But we go through that. And Terri mentioned the same thing with her book.
Well, you know, so just go back to what it felt like, you know, to watch Jay as when he's in his element.
Yeah.
That's the first man I fell in love with. So like I got to know him and it grew, but that composer, conductor, creative. And so to see him again after so many years be back in his element was really nice. It was really nice.
Thank you. I wasn't as intense as this picture. I was much more relaxed. That must have been a Klingon battle or something.
Yeah, it was Next Generation.
I was going to say, Terri, is Jay at his absolute most serious when he was doing his conducting?
Oh yeah, yeah. When he's working, yeah.
You don't get in the way, right?
Very professional. Very.
But you're the same way when you're writing. I said, "Hey Terri, I got a question." No, I'm busy writing now. Can't talk to you.
Yeah, now he's getting a little payback of what it's like when you're focused.
Now the tables have turned.
Yeah, because you got, you know, you're in your head and he's like, why aren't you listening to me? And it's like, I can't stop what I'm doing. It's like he couldn't stop what he was doing when he was doing.
It's true. It's true. You get so channeled, I guess it is. That's a good word for it. And it's hard to understand. That's why I don't know how relationships would work if people didn't understand what we each do. A lot of relationships don't work. One of the friends of mine who teaches a class at NYU says, well, the first thing I have to tell you about being a film composer is you're going to get divorced. So there's that.
Wait a second, weren't you told something similar when you went out on the boats, if I remember correctly from the book, Terri? Wasn't there a bit of advice given to you about communicating and not letting it destroy your relationship?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the quote is, but he's got it written on his phone, so he must know.
And Terri, what are your hopes for the book? Because obviously by the time this interview airs, we'll be very close to kind of publishing date. What are your hopes for the book?
Well, I hope it lives on and on and on, you know, because, you know, for people who want to know about composing, and so, you know, through history. So I hope it lives on and on and on, and I hope it gets out there, and I hope people enjoy it. You know, I think, a lot of it is behind the scenes and what it takes to create the music. And I think people are interested in that. They want to know what it's like. Mm-hmm. So it's fun to share it. And the other thing I tried to do is try to put enough description of the time period, because, you know, things were different in different eras and there were different things going on, which reflected in his music, I think. So.
Yeah. And I'd like to add too, it should be a prerequisite that people would actually watch the episode, The Inner Light, because in a way,
If they haven't,
in a way, the book does in some more lengthy way of what that episode did. It allowed the principal character in that episode
yeah,
to live his entire life in a 50-minute or 42-minute segment, and see his children grow and see environmental changes, etc. She's been able to do that in a book related to me, and discuss my inner light, just as Patrick Stewart,
and pass it on,
and passed it on. Although she's doing it through literature, they did it through a probe.
Oh, that's so neat.
Well, thank you. Maybe we're going to do a sequel. Maybe she's going to do a sequel.
Right?
So-
Because that's the whole thing.
so-
They wanted him to carry on their legacy, that they were alive and that they had, their lives meant something.
And nobody asked me what the title meant, but that's how I interpret it. So another thing she did, interesting, I don't see too many books that do this, but instead of a bibliography, she has a filmography,
Discography.
a discography, and a list of all my publications. For many people don't know, I do tons of concert music, and it's all, it shows where they're available and how you can find them and listen to them, etc. So it's very, I'm flattered that she would do all this and write it all down so they can live on. And it's probably more complicated than sending up a probe.
Now, we do normally have a specific last question that we ask, but we're changing it, obviously, for the purposes of this interview. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask the last question.
If you put it in the notes.
Yes, it's like literally, it's there on the second page.
I'm winding him up. I'm winding him up.
Where it says last question right there.
I'm winding you up.
We're going to have some fun in Vegas, I know.
Oh, we are going to have a lot of fun in Vegas. So, okay, last question then, which is, what has I can't even talk now. What has this experience meant to you both?
Well, it's really interesting. Besides documenting his life and what it's done for him, for me, it has gotten me connected to the writers on Martha's Vineyard, the other local writers. And it is getting us connected to the creative community. So, because we've been here 10 years full time, well, but we're not full time because we live on the boat in winter.
Yeah.
So, in Mexico. So, most of the people we've met here has been our sailing friends and other people, because we also have a boat here. And so this is getting us connected to the creative community on Martha's Vineyard. And it's very exciting to I think it's good for both of us, because we've been retired for so long, to get connected again to people that are like-minded in the creative way. So that's been a real blessing. And you?
This is about the best gift of love that one could give to another person.
I'm gonna cry.
Oh, you old charmer, you, Jay.
Don't cry, really. It's okay. It'll make up for you taking out the strings.
Jay, don't be saying that now, or you'll be eaten separately now tonight. We don't want that to be happening after this interview.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what, this has been quite an episode. I really enjoyed this one. For those who don't know, book comes out 15th of June or July. June 15th. There we go. And it is available, I've just checked, it is available internationally on Amazon.com, and in America, for all of our lovely American friends, it's available from Barnes & Noble and bookshop.org. So make sure you pre-order your copy. I know I have. For everybody watching and listening at home, thank you so much for joining us this week. As I said, this has been a brilliant episode. Really enjoyed this one.
Thank you.
Until next time,
Okay.
live long and prosper.
Thank you.